Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, because I'm ending the year on a high note in the sense of this is my last actual interview of the year. I'll be doing some solo shows to kind of close things out because it's the holidays. I don't want to do that to anybody. And we're going to end it with my literal favorite topic. And I'm like ultra amped for today's show because this is something that I'm literally in the middle right now. And it's our final Financial Friday of the year as well. And you guys know who's going to be back on it is my man, Sean, with Denim. He's slaying it. Show the shirt, man. Come on.
I'm slaying it for the crew. Yeah.
Oh, dude, for the crew. I love it, man. Dude, what's new? I'm like, you know, we were saying before we started recording, these are my literal favorite shows because like the deeper and deeper I get into this whole thing called entrepreneurship, and I realize that it is literally all boils down to your costs, right? Knowing your finances, knowing your numbers. And there's a system behind all of this stuff. There's a process behind all of it. And I think that this is one of the biggest hurdles that so many people find themselves up against. And, you know, another thing we were talking about, like, I should just like get with the host of the Founders Podcast because I've been talking about him a lot here.
You've been pushing him.
Yeah. But like I was saying, man, it's the only podcast out there right now that's not talking about politics. And I'm just like, man, I get it about what's going on in DC, but damn, I got a business to run. And, you know, there's some clear underlying successes between a lot of the long-standing companies that are out there. And it really boils down to controlling their costs, keeping their expenses at a minimum, and then passing that savings along to their customers.
Jeff Bezos, your margin is my opportunity. And like there's one thing that we talk about at Denim a lot is like, and I think a lot of people know this in your career, you like start off really general as like a really junior person, and then you sort of specialize and maybe you're really good at heavy haul, flatbed, freight brokering, and then all of a sudden you get really senior and you have to generalize again. And that general strip on the top is like knowing your business, knowing the P&L, knowing how it runs. It all sort of comes down to the same sort of fundamentals.
Yeah, and it's constantly about like your internal systems, right? Like this is another thing too, where we're looking at, all right, how do I save time throughout my day, right? And if I can save time in my system that I operate in, I can make more sales calls because that's like my number one thing right now is revenue generating activities. I need to be focused on that. I need to get in front of more prospects, more customers. And, you know, in the IKEA episode alone, they were talking about how they dissected how they were shipping their product and how they made it into a way to where it was like collapsible and how they were able to save money on shipping, which then they were able to lower their prices to their customers to sell more product and everything.
Yeah. And they're like one of the most efficient companies of all time. Shout out to the Nordics, right? Because they're like, you shop at IKEA, first of all, it's a maze. You've got to get through the whole store. There's no pop in on aisle 2 and pop out. You've kind of got to take the full experience. But the other thing is, as you grab those tags, like the coffee table top from part 7562 applies to the same sort of maybe desk or to the same, you know, whatever. It's just way more efficient on how they go ahead and deploy material and how they have kind of the customer self-serve on a lot of that stuff. It's great.
No, absolutely, man. And that's what it is. And I like, there's so many synergies out there between every industry, right? Like, I think it's a process and business, I think business is like a science essentially, right? Once you figure it out, you can kind of apply it to multiple different industries. Yes, there's going to be some exclusions in there, but like, I look at it because, you know, one thing is I'm going into 2025 in my business, like I'm taking the Christmas break to dissect my P&L. Like I'm going through literally every dollar I spent and I'm seeing, all right, where can I cut? Where can I save? And then with those additional funds, then how do I reallocate them to other areas of my business? And I mean, this has to be a conversation you guys have to be having all the time with your guys' customers and even internally there, because, you guys are a real business. You guys have budgets and everything to follow as well.
Believe it or not,
Yeah.
and I have to pinch myself every morning when I wake up. So, we're running a real business. We start our planning in November. And so first week of November, each of the department heads sort of takes stock, like gives yourself a state of the union, right? On like, what did you accomplish this year? What were your goals? How did you measure up? Where did you fall short? What are your opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, right? And you kind of take an assessment. And then our management team gets together sort of towards the end of November, where we spend time basically sharing out what we've learned and kind of coming together on what the common goals are that we want to accomplish as a business, and how each of the leaders of their respective departments are sort of going to, bring their share to contribute to be able to reach our goals that we end up setting. And then December is like, okay, now we've got to kind of cascade it down to our teams. We've got to set the goals that we want to set. We're rolling. We do a form of OKRs here where we set our key results. And then we're ready to roll by January. So like, it's not for the faint of heart. Like It's work. Like this planning is work.
No, exactly. But it's so required, right? And I think that this is something that a lot of businesses it's a hurdle that you have to overcome when because you literally go from no revenue to holy shit, we're making money. And then you're like, all right, what do I do with this money? And then I think a lot of people, when you go from no money to making money, you spend it. Like it's almost like you forgot that you were broke once, right?
Yeah.
And then you're making every kind of like the US government, right? You spend $10 to $1 that you make, right? And then what you do from there is you get yourself in a really bad position, and then you go and sit with your CPA, or you sit with a factoring company, and you're like, here's all of this vomit that I have, dissect it and tell me what I actually have going on. And I've talked about this on my show numerous times. So getting a CPA and a bookkeeper is like the best money you can spend outside of an attorney as a small business, having them keep your books clean.
And it is not a once a year job. Okay.
Yeah.
This has come up with us a few times. We've got a handful of clients that are just firing up their QuickBooks because it's towards the end of the year and they want to sync all of their loads and transactions. We're like, oh God, like you didn't do this all year, and now we're starting to go through it all now. It's because the problems compound, right? If you have issues, it all sorts of compounds together, especially if you're looking to have your books kind of neat and tidy for tax season and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's needed, because it's like, I look at it as there's going to always be roller coasters inside of the market, right? And, if we're looking at this last year in particular, it's, there's a lot of conflicting headlines that are out there about what's going on and everything else. I can say from my position as somebody who actually cold calls shippers, there's not a need for them to change anything up right now. Right now, that's not to sit here and say, don't go out and cold call. I cold call every single day. But, you can be out there in the trenches doing that. And then you read a headline like, wait, I thought everything was supposed to be fine now. Why is nobody still working with me? And so it's like, you got to go in there and you got to think like you have to plan going into 2025, like nothing's going to change, right? Like even if there is a major spike in the market and everybody's making a shitload of money, which I think everybody wants ultimately, but like you can't change your spending habits, right? Like the way you operate in a down market, you have to apply that exact same strategy in an up market.
Here was, I was going through my notes. We were emailing back and forth on this last night. So December 14th, 2023 was the Financial Planning Financial Friday Freight Coach podcast episode. And I pulled my notes. Here's what we said. For the record, everybody, for the record, here's what we said. Things were not particularly looking up in December. We had like a little sort of, fleeting opportunity in January where everybody thought everything was awesome. It wasn't. Life was still going on. And so our advice in January was hoard cash, basically. Like keep an eye on your margins, diversify your customer base, protect yourself. Shit might go sideways. Just like keep your head on a swivel and like stay safe. Like don't get super aggressive. Like take calculated risks. Be smart about it. And the thing that we were worried about then, and I think we've seen this play out a couple of times, is like for you freight brokers out there, do not get upside down on your carrier payments.
Yeah.
It's a disaster, and so because we saw that happen a couple times through the end of 2023, and it happened again in 2024 as well. So that was our advice. Honestly, not bad advice. Okay, if
Very
we're
good advice.
feel like we fucking nailed it,
Yeah,
like
100%.
So here's my new take for the year. Are you ready?
Yes.
So it's a new year. There's a lot of spiking of the football, as you said, as everybody thinks that everything's great and money is falling from the sky. That is a really nice set of leading indicators. And I think we should be optimistic, and that's great. However, as brokers know, especially, the carrier rate changes first. The shipper rate changes second. And so hopefully that war chest that you've built up over the year because you were safe and thoughtful about it, you might need to tap it, right? Like you just might need to swallow even tighter margins as the shipper carrier equilibrium sort of changes. And you just kind of got to be thoughtful about that and be thoughtful about these relationships and kind of the capital that you're able to deploy to maybe retain a relationship through a next contracting period or, whatever. So that would be the one thing. The next thing I would tell you, listen, also, shout out to Corey and Steve. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. All right. I'm trying to keep it hype out here on Financial Friday.
Said your energy. Let's go. Let's go. Same with Corey, too. That's TGIF, everybody.
Here's my next take. So and it's not going to happen to anybody that listens to this podcast, for the record, but as freight brokerages run into service issues because they can't fill at the lanes that the rates that they want, the loads are staying open. The shippers might need to diversify who they're working with. Maybe they're not happy with their internal group. Maybe they're not happy with the providers that they already have, and they want to mix it up, which happens.
Yes.
If you can't fill, it happens.
Yes.
And so that to me tells me to, stay on the phone, right? Like stay on the phone. Bad days happen to everybody. Your opportunity, right? Trash and treasure. We all know the saying, right? Like there's opportunity there if you're kind of right place, right time, to be able to expand, right, your book, which would be great. And so last piece I would say, that's growth capital, right? So just like make sure that you have cash on hand, or you have a factoring partner, or you have a working capital solution, or whatever. If you're able to take advantage of some of this growth and some of this change, volatility is opportunity. We all know that, that you're prepared, right? And you're ready to rip on that. And so those are my 3 points. I'll leave it at that. Those are my 3 points.
I look at it as, you should legitimately always be selling, right? And my biggest fear is, and this isn't just me talking out of my ass here. This is like a statistical point across most businesses. It's the Pareto principle. 80% of their business is tied up with, 80% of your revenue is like with one or two customers, right? And I think that it might even be even deeper than that inside of transportation, right? Where they might have.
Yeah, that's right.
I've actually seen multiple posts about this week throughout social media is the amount of people who have one or two core customers that account for like 85 to 90% of their business. And, the sentiment out there is, hey, we're not selling right now because nobody's adding anybody anyways. Well, what you described there, Sean, and again, I've been talking about this for a year, you guys. The difference between this show and other shows is I actually broker freight, okay? I actually am in the industry, okay? Gabe Pinkinen, he's another one who has a podcast out there. Brian with Veritas Logistics, they are out there putting out, they are actively in the industry, okay? You can have all the data and speculation you want out there, but what Sean described about how this market is going to flip is 1000% accurate, okay? Carriers will raise their rates. Customers will dig their heels in. They do not want to increase their transportation spend. And then there's going to be a bunch of brokers who are going to be like, holy shit, we don't know how to make any money. Wait, I can't tough talk this driver anymore. I can't tell him to take it or leave it. I don't have any capacity. And then hold on, what was that? That was a phone call. Chris with Freight Coach Logistics? Yeah, man, we just had a bunch of service failures this week. I would love to talk to you because you've been cold calling me for the last 6 months. hoping to get an opportunity, right? Because the reality is, you guys, in the real world, all of your, as Kara Brown said, all of your customers are somebody else's prospect. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I got like a fucking 1,000 of them that I'm prospecting right now, okay? And if you're on that list, and if you're not doing all of these things that I talk about on this show, about how to strategically balance carrier relationships, how to service your customers and everything else, it's, as they say on South Park, you're going to have a bad time next year.
Gonna have a bad time.
Very bad time. But again, you can take everything that I've said over this Christmas break and go back, listen to all these old episodes. Everything's out there. You can get your strategy together. But you need to be on offense here going into this stuff, you guys, because you cannot put yourself in a position in business to have all of your revenue tied up with a couple of people, because one mistake could cost you your entire business, and then layoffs come in and all of this stuff. I don't want that to happen. Okay. But I get it. I get how it is when you're cold calling, you're building your book of business. It's lonely. Somebody opens their door, they let you in, they feed you, they keep you warm from the cold. And then you're like, well, I don't want to go back out there. It's scary. Everybody says no. You got to legitimately, and then back into the systems. You got to keep your systems going where your team takes it over, they run with it, and you have people who are constantly hunting for new business. Because if you don't, when I say it's the longest sales cycle I've ever seen, Sean, I'm like, at a minimum, you're looking at 12 months from the first time you get somebody on the phone to actually onboarding them as a shipper. Okay. And then if you've ever onboarded a customer, you don't just get access to $20,000, $30,000 a month worth of freight of profit for your business. You're like another 6 months to a year away from actually seeing some real growth there. Right. So it's like, I don't want to see anybody get back. And that's why I've said, like, I truly think if there's going to be a mass exodus from this industry at all, it's going to be on the freight broker side, because they're relying on 2021 or 2022 sales success to this day. And it's worked out and it's great. But man, you're one bad load away from losing all of it.
Here's the thing I would say too. And like, diversifying your customers is very important to your freight brokerage business.
Yes.
If you need to live on low or no margin for a quarter in your freight brokerage business, you better have another revenue stream to make money to put food on the table. Just like, be honest about it, right? And so if you have agents on your team, if you have 1099s and you're the business owner and you're watching the money come and go, like, if you're relying only on freight and your margins in your freight are very slim, it's not going to be fun for you. And so, I think people are getting smart about this in freight. And there are some folks that are using their position to be able to create new revenue for them and for their business. Some people have media.
Yes.
And they're very savvy about it, right? So the Freight Coach podcast, you've got Gabe, right? There are people that run media as a supplement to the income for the brokerage. There are brokerages who run fuel for their carriers.
Yep.
And they take cents on the dollar for the carriers in their network. There are brokers who have dispatching services that they provide, and they take share even if the carrier is not moving freight for them, because it's somebody that they've gotten to know and trust and built a relationship over time. So like, there are other ways to make money as a freight broker. Look at your position of strength. Look at where you have like permission, market permission to act, and think through contingency plans and areas that you have new opportunity, while maybe your core engine is not humming at the pace and throwing out as much cash as you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, you really do. I think we're about to embark upon a time in the industry here, whether it's 6 months, year. I don't know, Sean, how long shippers are going to dig their feet in and try and keep rates the same. And again, the same is relative. All right. There might be a incremental bump, that might come along with it, but I don't think it's going to be as major as some are hoping, or like the sentiment out there in the social media world is everything's going to be great and we're all going to have Ferraris in the next couple of months. How are you working with your current partners, right? Like, how many of the people out there know that, like with you guys in particular, about quick pay and other things, like how they can increase their revenue? Like, and we, again, you guys, we've talked about this numerous times over the last 12 months. Are you taking that? Taking advantage isn't the right word, but it is at the same time of what your relationships.
I mean, you capitalizing on these opportunities, right? Like that's exactly it.
And are you having those conversations out there, right? And because again, you guys, you need a war chest to survive. You need to be extremely diligent. All right. And then again, you don't have to take my word for it. Go listen to the people who have built the largest companies in North American history. They all talk about controlling your expenses.
And think about it this way: your quick pay program at 3%, a 7% margin load and a 10% margin load are a lot different, right? Yeah. And so finding ways to create a percentage point here, a percentage point there, can be really material, especially as you kind of get to the end of the year, which is exactly kind of the process that we're in. So let's talk about our plan, Jolly, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here are some things you need to put in your plan. First, this is what we do. We basically set an outside-in goal for the business. What do we want to accomplish? Now, for a venture-backed company, that might be a funding round. It might be profitability, right? It might be, if you're a bootstrap business like yourself, maybe it's, I want to grow enough to hire an X, or I want to be able to reach a market share of Y, or I want to, or Z, whatever your business goal is for you. It's typically not a dollar amount, right? It's, you want to accomplish a thing. So like, if I am a broker and I $98,000 and $99,000 there, I mean, it's the same thing. Figure out what's driving that goal for you and for your business. The next thing I would say, figure out what your internal resources are, your expenses, like get a good handle on what levers you have to pull in the business. So where's your time spent? Where's your dollars going? Which partners are you using? How are you going to think about this? Is it the right ones next year as it is this year, right? Like, where are you going to hit breaking points? Like, that stuff is also really common, especially if you're in a growing business. The next thing I would say, map out into bite-sized pieces, right? What accomplishing those goals are going to look like for you, what your expenses are going to need to look like in order for you to reach those goals. So like saying that you're going to triple sales and it's my buddy Chris Jolly hitting the phone all day, every day, doing the same thing he was doing last year is not reasonable. So we've got to figure out a way to be able to provide the resources in order to reach the targets and play that like back and forth game. It's a tightrope for sure. And so as you map that out, where are the greatest risks in your plan? I feel like this number is a layup. I feel like this one is making me nauseous. And so like, how are you organizing yourself, organizing your partners, your teams, right? Your time into de-risking or making sure that you're hitting the areas of where you are most concerned. Do you have metrics that indicate whether or not this area of risk or the area of concern you're able to address faster? So like, if your margin numbers are areas where you're most concerned, do you have a good sense for carrier pricing? If your revenue numbers or your customer counts are the most concerned, then do you have a good sense for what your activity looks like on the phone? Like, what does your conversion look like from, prospect into lead into customer, that sort of stuff. So like, have a good eye on what your biggest areas of risk are. Have a good eye on what your leading indicators are, your measures, to see how you're accomplishing this. And all of this feeds into your plan. And don't set a plan in December and then look at it in December. Don't do what I did with my financial planning podcast, okay? Like, you should get a good sense for your plan throughout the year as you go. Check in once a quarter, check in once a month.
And that's exactly what I have recently started doing. I would say as of October of this year is I am constantly looking at every dollar we spend. And that's what I'm doing. Like I was saying earlier, over the Christmas break, I just got my year-end financials essentially from my bookkeeper. I'm going through and I'm doing a comparative analysis between 2023, 2024. Why was there a spike in certain areas? What's the why behind it? Was there more travel due to, prospecting or, going to meet average, all of that stuff. And, I'm going to look at my monthly expenses, right? Like, I added to my team this year. I have somebody who does stuff behind the scenes where, we've incurred a greater investment just to produce the show now? Are we using those tools every single month? And I think you could break that down at the seat level inside of a brokerage as well, right? Did you sign up for a bunch of software that maybe doesn't have the biggest price tag? I think the biggest killers are the $50 or $70 a month subscription fees that you forget that you're paying. And then you go out there and you're like, wait, I spent $4,000 on this, or I spent $6,000 on that. And, obviously there's some banking fees that come along with it, right? Like if you use QuickBooks, for example, and you let your customers pay via credit card, there's a transaction fee that comes with stuff like that. But there's an explanation behind it, right? But are there any glaring items on your P&L that you're like, why did we spend all this money on this? Does anybody even use this? And I think like you taking that, setting that up, and I would almost sit down on a monthly basis. I wouldn't even give it a quarter. I would do on a monthly basis until you get a grasp behind it. Because if you have auto pay and auto set up on a bunch of stuff, a lot of stuff goes out and you don't pay attention to it, because like you got to think some of these companies, you guys, they have a team of people behind the scenes who are like, hey, if we drop our prices to this, or if we keep our prices at that, even if people stop using it, they don't notice. Look at Planet Fitness, for example, or whatever that gym is. They keep their price, and they've came out and said it, right? They keep their price at a certain point where they know nobody will cancel it even when they stop coming in, right? Whether that's ethical or not is irrelevant to the conversation, but you as the consumer.
It's so low, people don't care. Yeah.
That adds up. All right. That adds up. And if you think about that, as a business owner or whatever, and you break it down over an annual, every 3-year basis, and you look at, we're talking, that might buy you something. That might be the down payment for a building or something like that. Shit adds up. And I don't think enough people pay close enough attention to that.
Here's a lesson that we got at Denim, and I think there might be something here for folks if they want. And I'll warn you, it is work, but like good governance is a good forcing function for this stuff. So like we have a board meeting once a quarter. You can have, if you don't have a board, you can have a meeting with your spouse, and you can just say, be my accountability partner. Yep. Here's how we did this month, this quarter, whatever, for your own sort of sake of sanity and a forcing function. The other thing is like, we have Expensify. It sucks, right? Like it sucks to do expenses, but like I know what's on my credit card every month because I have to look at it and I have to enter it in. And like, man, do I really need this like PDF converter thing for $10? This is a pain in the neck to put on my Expensify account. I really don't use this thing anymore. Forget it. Right. And so it's just like, there's some like good friction. We talk about that sometimes. It's like, there's good friction. And like, that's one of those things. It's like getting an approval at a big company to run an expense is annoying, but it is there on purpose because they've seen this game play a couple of times. And so creating some friction for yourself to be able to be thoughtful about what money's going out the door could be a good thing for you to adopt if you want to kind of keep a closer eye on this stuff.
I think it's the only way you survive long-term in business. I really do. Like you have to treat this as it is a different beast. All right. And I'm learning this. I'm never going to sit here and try and act like I have it all figured out. I don't, right? I don't know anything, man. I'm figuring this shit out as I go. And what I've learned this year in particular is it's like, dude, you got to treat this as an actual business, right? Like this isn't a play account. This is like, you have to rein shit in and you have to do this because otherwise, man, like unfortunately most businesses they're one bad event from losing everything. That's why it's, again, back to statistics, you guys, I don't just talk out of my ass. The overwhelming majority of small businesses, which is like a large percentage of our economy, are 30 days away from going out of business every single month due to capital constraints alone. That is like, we're not even talking about anything else. That just capital constraints alone, 30 days away from going out of business. And if you are like me and are sick and tired of being in that position, you got to start treating your shit differently. You really do. You got to have hard conversations. And again, just like with everything in business, you guys, it starts with you. All right. You can't blame the market. You can't blame anything else. It's you. It's on you to figure this shit out.
Yeah, 1,000% agree. And I would say to folks like, this is real. This is real money. We're hitting a really important point in kind of how the freight markets are turning. There's going to be a lot of opportunity out there, and like the best businesses are made in tough markets. And so if you're able to develop this discipline, if you're able to develop this like level of governance now, it will pay dividends for you when the market starts to pop off, and you can have that much more kind of in your pockets and into the business as opposed to leaking out the side door unintended.
I love it. That is the way we end it. And pay attention, you guys, because Sean and I will be continuing to come back and he'll be slaying it over Christmas.
I'll be slaying it into 2025. Yes.
Every single day, you guys. We're going to continue to bring this because we talk about the fundamentals of business, you guys. Like, this is not I'm trying to figure all this stuff out just like everybody is who watches this show. We're here to talk about best practices, you guys, and we're going to continue to do that, all right? I'm not going to fly off the rails and start talking about anything else because I got a business to run, all right? I can't pay attention to any of that stuff. I got to grow my revenue. It's on me, and we're going to continue to do that on this show for all of eternity, all right? Because that's just the way that things are going to be. It's going to be focused on best practices, what you guys can do to actually find success out there in the real world. But that will be it, you guys. I hope you guys all have a Merry Christmas. We're not going live next week because, you guys, it's Christmas, all right? And go spend time with your family and your loved ones. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.